Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up, y'all? Peace, peace, peace. Love, love, love. Many blessings, many blessings. I want to talk about understanding what adultery and fornication and sex is outside of the natural, and it's natural to think about physical sex and physical adultery and physical fornication as in the natural sense of things, but a lot of us don't necessarily understand how it affects us spiritually. And that's the side I kind of want to touch on tonight. Let's jump into it. When God's chosen people, the Israelites, were coming out of slavery in Egypt and wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, right before God gave them the land that they were supposed to go into, which was the land of Canaan. God had given them rules, and He laid them out, and He gave them to Moses to give to the people of Israel. He didn't want this land, this special land, this set apart land, to be defiled. It was already being defiled by the people that were in there, the land of Canaan. It was Canaanites, and there was a whole bunch of different people: Jebusites, Hittites, Amorites, Edomites. It was a whole bunch of people already in this land. And right before they were to enter this land, He gave them one rule in particular that deals with spiritual fornication and spiritual adultery, which we can find in Exodus 34, verse 13 and 14, which goes into when we enter the land, don't make covenants with the people of the land. Don't give your daughters or your sons to the people of the land. Otherwise, your hearts are going to leave the Most High God and are going to start serving their gods. And when we did enter this land, what we were to do was to tear down their images, um, their altars, tear down our temples. And one thing that stood out, and I really had to do some digging to figure this out, was to tear down their groves. There was these things called groves, and when you look into the etymology of the word grove, what it means is a Shira pole. So, and who Ashira was is an ancient Canaanite um, sex and fertility goddess, which obviously they worshipped, right? Um, and so what we were to do is to go into this land and completely destroy all of that stuff. And when they come into the land, obviously they disobeyed God, and we can read that in the book of Judges, chapter 3. It proved that they did not tear down the land. I mean, not tear down the land, but tear down these groves and altars and shrines and all these things that made them fall into idolatry, right? Um, and why? Because it was probably a real lustful thing, and that they could not, you know, overcome that. So that's probably why they didn't tear them down. But nonetheless, they didn't tear them down and destroy them anyway. So, in all throughout, going further down the line, going further down history, just for the sake of time, all throughout, these things stayed in the land of Canaan throughout the time of the judges and throughout the time of the kings. Um, starting with, some people like to say starting with David, but I'm not going to start with David. Uh, I'm going to start with King Solomon, because King Solomon, um, he pretty much did exactly what the Most High told him not to do. He took a ton of strange wives, a total of 1,000 wives and concubines, which God had warned him back in Exodus. Hey, if you take all these, wives, and if you guys give your sons to them and your daughters to them, and they give their daughters and sons to you, your heart is going to be led into worshiping their false gods. And unfortunately, that was um, King Solomon's greatest sin. And so when he did this, um, in order to appease these women, he built up what the Bible describes as high places. Some translations, I think the Message Bible, um, it says that it translates the words high places into um, sexual and religious shrines. And so from King Solomon, um, that's not necessarily when these sexual shrines started, because we know pre-Israel getting to the land of Canaan, they were already there, but we were commanded to tear them down. But obviously, David didn't do that, and I believe he built more. That building more was just my personal belief, but the Bible bears record to him building uh, um, shrines and high places for all his wives, and obviously, he went into that sexual perverseness um, as well. And there, I mean, that we did have some good kings. I can think of four right off top: Hezekiah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, and Josiah. But not necessarily not. They all were good kings, and I think all but one, or possibly even two, um, left those high places up. Now, the Bible does describe them as having the mind and heart of God, but unfortunately, they did not tear down those high places. I believe Asa may have teared them down, and I think Hezekiah may have teared them down, or tore them down. Josiah may have as well. I don't believe Jehoshaphat did. I'm have to go back and reread about Jehoshaphat. Um, but throughout the succession of the kings, the majority of the kings never tore down those high places, those religious and sexual temples and shrines and statues. They just did not tear them down for whatever reason. Um, but when you read through Chronicles, and when you read through First and Second Kings, you're going to see a repetitive saying. Whenever a new king takes over, it's either going to say he was good in the sight of God, or for the majority of them, they did evil in the sight of God, and they did not tear down those high places, meaning sexual and religious shrines. And you're going to see that every time you see a new king taking over. It never fails. So go ahead and read through First and Second Kings, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But um, during that time, there was um, there were temples. They were called Astarte temples. Now, Astarte, Astarte, whatever you want to say, is the same as Ashira. Okay, these are the same gods. It's just at one point we were in ancient Mesopotamian command, or Canaanite, or Phoenician time, and then Astarte came into play, or Ashereth or Astarte, that came into play when we were in in an Assyrian time frame, or an Assyrian era. Okay, so these were Astarte temples, and what these temples were sacred prostitution ritual temples. Astarte, like I said, is the same as Ashira, and what they were ancient sexual and fertility goddesses worshipped by the ancient Canaanites. And um, obviously, you can see that they were still in the land, because it's mentioning it here. And so, what would happen was when the people of the land, Canaanites, Israelites, Edomites, Hittites, whoever was in the land, when their daughters became of an age to where they were had their period and they became um, childbearing, they would take their daughters to these temples, and they would sacrifice their daughters' virginity for um, divine uh, favor from these goddesses, okay, from the gods, or whatever you want to say. But they would sacrifice, they would give up their daughter's virginity in exchange for divine favor and happiness, and crops and whatever they needed. But they would sacrifice their daughter's virginity um, for divine favor. Uh, in, in and I think in Kings you'll probably read the word Ashtoreth, but it's the same. It's a variation of Astarte, and it's a variation of Ashira. Okay, those are all the exact same. And here's one that is not mentioned in the Bible, but I did some research, and y'all may know this name. It's called in this ancient goddess is called Inanna. And the reason I say that you all may recognize that name is because people of a particular age, like myself, we remember a female rap artist by the name of Foxy Brown, and she will always refer to her vagina, or her private parts, or whatever you want to say. I'm trying to keep it clean, just in case y'all got kids listening, or it's out loud or whatever. But she will always reference her vagina by calling it Il Nana, doing a play on words. But she was pretty much referencing this ancient Canaanite, Phoenician, Assyrian goddess called Inanna. Okay, and but and that's the only reason I said that you guys may recognize his name, but you didn't catch on, because like a lot of, just like me, and like a lot of us, we just thought it was a cool word. um but like I said, she just used to play on the words. Okay, so in but if by chance these girls that were having their virginity sacrificed for divine favor, if by what if they did become pregnant, um and this is where um the god most of you will probably be familiar with Molech and Baal, or Baal, or Baal. Some people, they have different variations of how to pronounce his name, but I'll just say Baal. Um, they would take these illegitimate children, because obviously, whoever had sex with them, you know, they uh, they went about their day. Um, uh, they would take these children and they would sacrifice them to the god Baal, or to this god Molech. Now, these were the male deities of ancient Canaan, or Phoenicia, or uh, Assyria, or whatever. Okay, and you can read about you know the sacrificing, or the burning of children, in Jeremiah chapter 19 and 5. Okay, so um, but yeah, so just to recap real quick, Astarte temples where they will perform ritual prostitution sacrifices to the sex goddess Astarte in what was known as the Astarte temple. And if by chance they had children, they would sacrifice those illegitimate children to the male false gods named Baal or Molech. You can read about that again in Jeremiah 9. Okay, now sticking with Jeremiah, in Jeremiah chapter 3, in verse 9 says, well, it talks about Israel and Judah committing adultery with stone and stocks. Now, obviously, you know what stones are, but stocks, all that is wood. So, just to reword that, um, we'll say that God talks about Israel and Judah, which were these two kingdoms that we were just talking about, the kings of. They would commit adultery with wood and stone, pretty much. Now, if you look at Deuteronomy 28, verse 64, or Deuteronomy 4 and 28, you would see the exact same wording, except they don't use the word stock. They use the word wood. They use the word wood. So Deuteronomy 28 and 64, Deuteronomy 4 and 28. It says that Israel, because of sin, Deuteronomy 28:64, because of sin, um, they're going to be scattered into all these different places, and the children of Israel were going to worship um, wood, gods of wood and stone, gods made with man, with men, the hands of men. Okay, so it's just like you going into your backyard and carving out a piece of wood that looked like whatever, and you begin to bow down and worship that thing. Okay, uh, and and so in 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 Jeremiah again was referencing. Um, he was referencing what was going on in Israel, in the land of Canaan. I don't think they ever called the land Israel, but during that time it was called the land of Canaan. But Jeremiah was referencing what the kingdoms of Israel and Judah were doing during that time. They were worshiping gods of wood, a Shiras pole, and stone statues, and shrines and things like that. Okay, and these were what I told you they were called, the sexual and religious um, shrines. Okay, and groves or images and temples. Okay, that led to the people of Israel serving these gods and worshiping these gods and bowing down to these gods. Okay, now with all that little bit of history that I just gave you, how does that relate to us today? So, a lot of us believe that, you know, we don't worship other gods. Um, but let's take a deep look at that. Let's look at now. This is a very popular verse. So a lot of you may know this, but Jeremiah 10, um, verses 2 and 3, and it talks about not being as the heathen and going into the forest and cutting down trees and decking it out, or making it look good with silver and gold, and fastening it to the floor that it doesn't move. But it also says that they can neither speak nor see nor hear nor smell or anything like that. And what that's going into, God was again telling the children of Israel and Judah, do not do this, because what you're going to be doing, going into the forest, chopping down a tree, wood, and worshiping these man-made gods. Okay, so so talking about the tree, which is wood again, and which are what Jeremiah was referencing. These are Osiris pose. Okay, and what? Let me ask you a question. What do we do every year? Um, there's something we do every single year to where we probably don't necessarily go into the forest ourselves and chop down these trees, but someone goes and chops them down. They come back and sell it to us. We take these trees into our house and we do exactly what God told us not to do. We fasten it to the floor. We deck it with gold and silver, make it look pretty and stuff. And we worship these things by putting the word worship literally means to bow down. So we worship these trees by putting presents under them, and we have to bow down to pick those things up, right? And so, what that celebration is, we never think of it this way, and hopefully you get a little more understanding. But those trees are Ashiwa's poles, correct? And what we call it today is Christmas. Okay, we call that once a year celebration to where we do exactly what God told us not to do. We call that celebration Christmas. It's the worshiping of the ancient sex goddess Ashira. Okay, worshiping wood. Ashira's pole or Ashira's poles were or groves, either one, it's fine. Were these images carved out from wood and chopped down from wood. Okay, remember Ashira's pole, Ashira. Remember, Ashira is also Astarte, or I didn't get to this yet, or the Persians called her Ishtar. Now, what do you think the American name for Ishtar is? The American name or the English name for Ishtar is Easter. Probably didn't know that. But the American or English name for Ishtar is Easter. So when you celebrate Easter the way you do with the bunnies and eggs and stuff, you're actually um, paying reverence to an ancient sexual and sex and fertility goddess, just like the Israelites were doing back way back when, before they even came into the land of Canaan, and when they had kings um, in the land of Canaan, when they had the southern and the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, just like that. They were doing what you're doing today. You're doing the exact same thing. Now let's bring this kind of full circle. So they had temples back then, right? Those temples back there all are your modern churches today. Those Asherah poles that they had by or in their temples, your churches um, have those Christmas trees inside of their churches most of the time. If your pastor or clergyman that's the head of your church, and you go there and you see these trees in there, well, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah also had these. They called them high places, religious and sexual places of worship, just like the modern day church. Okay? So, and like I said, these things were never done away with at all. Okay? They continued and continued and continued to do these things, and it built up and it carried with them in their hearts and in their minds throughout the generations. And now it's exactly what we're doing today. Okay, so it's still a part of our culture, and God calls the generation we're living in now and a wicked, and get this, adulterous generation. Understand? All right, so why are we adulterous? Because why are we adulterous? Because we continue to worship All these old goddesses and gods of sex and fertility, okay, defying the very law that God told us, that God gave us, instructing us not to do it. All right. So going back to the Astarte temples real quick, when our daughters were prostituted to gain favor with these false gods, okay, and if they were pregnant, they sacrificed those children, those babies, to the gods Molech or Baal. Now, where do you see that happening? It's still happening today. Our daughters, our women, women are out here really prostituting themselves. And for the most part, if they get pregnant, what do? They go get an abortion. Now, here's a part of the abortion that a lot of people don't know about. When these children, when these women have these illegitimate children by whomever, just like in the Temple of Astarte, when they have these abortions, so doctors take out what they want, but what do they do when with the leftover fetus that they can't do research on? What they do is they burn it. Okay, so this is continuing the worship of Astarte or Ashereth or Ishtar or Ashira. This is continuing the worship of the ancient sex and fertility goddess Astarte and the ancient male deity um, Baal or Molech. Okay, so and how do we know that this is what is being practiced? Because the Bible says in Ecclesiastes 1:9 that there's nothing new under the sun. What was done once will be done again. There's nothing new. But the Bible also tells us that, we are destroyed because of lack of knowledge. We are out here believing that, we're just doing something and it's not going to have any repercussions. But unfortunately, that's not true. We are actually reverencing and revering ancient sex goddesses. Now, it could have been practiced a little different, but it's the same nonetheless. Okay, we're still going after these weird and these false pagan gods that can neither hear nor speak nor eat nor taste nor anything, right? And these are the gods that our Most High God told us not to go after. All right, and unfortunately, this is what a lot of our women are falling victim to through this feminist, this sexual liberation, women empowerment movement. All they're doing is teaching you to worship these ancient female deities. This is why. Um, this is why. Um, they're pushing so hard for uh, the this the male deity, which is the Most High God, um, to be disbanded and demolished or demolished. This is why they're pushing so hard for you to believe that um, you are empowered and you deserve to be worshipped for absolutely no reason. This is exactly why they're teaching this thing. Okay, and it's really sad to say, but a lot of our men are running right behind this doctrine as well. A lot of our men are suckers for this doctrine. And I'm not picking on anybody, because guess what? I was a part of that as well until I start studying. I was absolutely a part of that. Um, and 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 it's crazy because of what we're falling to, fellas, we really gotta be headstrong and be disciplined in these things, because you know it's what's happening is these women were taught to not dress modestly. They're being taught to not dress modestly, and if and if you got it, flaunt it, and getting these BBLs and packing on so much makeup to they literally change the way they look, and sometimes even change their skin color. But this is why God, the Most High God of Israel, tells our women to dress modestly and cover themselves. But unfortunately, just like so many of our ancestors, we're not doing that. Okay, so they're literally making themselves out to be a Shira's pose. Remember the decoration of a Shira's pose. They will be cut down, and then they deck themselves with gold and silver or jewels, and they fasten themselves to the ground, and they flaunt around as if they adorn themselves um, lustfully and in lustful attire, and they make themselves out to be this beautiful image, just like a Shira's pole. And they make themselves into this image that 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 should be worshipped at all cost. And fellas, we really gotta be on our shit when it comes to rejecting this stuff, because it's not harmless. It is not harmless. What they're doing is making themselves out to be goddesses. And all these women, especially um, Egyptian doctrine type women, um, uh, or that show these weird ass pictures and of women with their legs open and shit like that, which symbolizes sexual liberation, and they can bang whoever they want to, and all this shit. And you, fellas, we gotta be on our shit, and like no joke. Not only are we falling for it, fellas, but women are lying and deceiving themselves. They are in the midst of worshiping themselves. Again, getting BBLs and taking pictures and videos, stroking their long bought hair, showing all the damn makeup, posing all in these videos and pictures, like with nothing else to offer other than what they look like or their beauty. They're portraying themselves as sexual goddesses. Now, you don't have to believe in the book of Jubilees or the book of Jasher or the book of Enoch or anything like that, but they do mention that the fallen angels, or otherwise known as the Watchers, came down, and they taught women how to do these things. And this dates back to when Eve lusted after the tree of knowledge of good and evil. She was taught self-worship, and she was taught how to get Adam to fall as well. And we can read about that in Ezekiel chapter 28. But that can be a different story. A different lesson for a different time. But they, like I said, they completely changed their appearance, and they're doing it all for us to fall, as well as they're deceiving themselves, and they're worshiping themselves, and they want us to worship them as well. So fellas, be on your P's and Q's, man, and be knowledgeable of what's going on, so that you don't fall into this shit. And a lot of you dudes, and don't, and like I said, I'm not picking on you, because I was one of them dudes too, but a lot of you dudes are you know pacifying this type of behavior. You know what I mean? You guys are you're posting and putting pictures up and making posts about all these different women. It's just going into the worshiping of sexual um, goddesses. You know what I mean? Goddesses of sex and goddesses of fertility. Get what I'm saying? And I'm hoping you guys understand, but you are playing a part in, idolatry or sexual worship or going after other gods. The same thing that God told us not to do. He told us to tear down those poles and those altars and those images, you know. And how can we as men tear down those images and those Asherah poles, and how can we stop it? By not pacifying and not simping to that shit. Get what I'm saying? All right, so and I'm going to start trying to I'm going to start trying to close out now. I only wanted to go for like 15 minutes, but just to bring this to a close and bring it all together. Why is it that God calls all these type of things um, 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 adulterous and fornication? And when God speaks about Judah and Israel as a nation, and when He tells you um, that Judah and Israel went whoring after false gods, and He calls them whores and He calls them adulterers as a whole. Why was this? Why was it? It's because of two reasons. All right. One of the scriptures I think we already covered. If we didn't cover it, we're going to go to Exodus 20:1 with 20 in chapter 20, verse 1 through 3, which is, it speaks on the very first commandment, which is, thou shalt not worship no other gods before thee. Don't bow down to him. Don't worship him. I am a jealous God. Don't worship any gods besides me. Okay. And the second one, we can look at in Ephesians 5, and I really encourage you all to read the entirety of Ephesians chapter 5, but I'm going to go to one specific verse, and it says, he speaks when he talks about the relationship between a man and a woman. He's speaking. He said he's gonna show you a mystery, and this is Ephesians chapter 5, verse 32. He said he's gonna show you a mystery. This is the mystery here. He's speaking about Christ and his church. That lets you know right there that he's not necessarily talking about things in a carnal sense or in a fleshly sense. He's talking about something more spiritual. Okay, we are his church. It says, women, submit yourselves to your husband as your husband submits to God or to Christ. The same way that we as men submit to Christ, the women should submit to us. And again, he compares us as his wife or as his woman, and he is the husband. So he's talking about, again, he's making a comparisons between us and the way we deal with our women to him and the way he deals with the church. Okay? So it's a good way to understand. It's how I came to an understanding that adultery and sex and fornication and all these things were not only natural but more so spiritual, and we should really look at things in a spiritual sense. Now, like I said, it's natural for us to, when we hear the word sex and fornication and adultery and prostitution and all that stuff, it's natural to think that who's ever speaking is talking about the physical act of sex, but we really have to dig deeper. And when we teach, you know, when we teach and when we speak on, or when we tell somebody else, hey, um, no prostitution or no immoral sex acts or no sex before marriage or whatever, we have to really understand and teach the spiritual side as well. Okay. Now, just speaking on no sex before marriage. Um, when a man and a woman uh, get together and have sex, they produce a child, right? And this is after becoming one through marriage, and becoming one flesh, as the Bible say. They're no longer two, but they have become one flesh, and that child represents producing life. Now, like I said, it's not talking about uh, um, uh, the physical act of a man and a woman getting together. I'm just using this as an analogy, just like the Most High did. It's talking about when we become one with the Most High, God gives us His Spirit. And by His Spirit, we go out and we produce life. Get what I'm saying? When a man and woman gets together, when they decide to become one through the sexual act, it is not talking about a man and a woman getting together and having sex in the spiritual sense. What it's talking about is when we decide to become one with the Most High and really chase after and yearn after the Most High, He gives us His Spirit. And by that Spirit, which is His Word, which is His commandments, we go out and we teach and we produce life. We produce children of the Word. And when they grow older and they decide to become one with God, they go out and they produce more life. The greatest gift God gives us is the ability to produce life. Okay, so in in having sex before marriage, is it morally right? Yeah, of course. But the atheists, they wait. Not having sex before marriage, but not having sex before marriage, is it morally right? Yeah, of course. But the atheists, they don't have sex before marriage sometimes. The Muslims and Buddhist and a lot of people don't have sex before marriage. That's not necessarily saying that you're righteous because you're doing it. That's just saying you have some sort of conscience. Hey, I'm not going to have sex before marriage. I'm just not going to do that. But how do you how do you teach this to um, how do you teach this in a sense to where it can be more to where it can be more spiritual and they can have a real thorough understanding and really commit themselves to the ways of the Most High? And I use this sometimes. How do you teach this to a eunuch, someone who's had their penis cut off or their balls cut off, or who can't produce children? How do you make them understand no sex before marriage? How do you make them understand the laws of fornication and adultery? It's through the spiritual sense, not through the natural sense. They can't produce children. They can't produce life if they're eunuchs or if they had hysterectomies. How do they abide by the law of sex and fornication? It's through the understanding and teaching of this thing spiritually, not physically. Okay? So, I hope you all learned a little something. I try to do the best I can. I'm not that articulate of a man, but I try to do the best I can. uh, y'all can text me through Facebook. Y'all can text me through the Natural Order Podcast at gmail.com, or email me rather. Follow me on YouTube. You know, I'm just growing. I don't have that many followers yet, but having a lot of followers is not the main idea. It's not the main objective, man. I wanna be a vessel. And I want to use the spirit in me to produce life, man. So peace to you all. Blessings, 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 and y'all have a good night.